When you're pushed to the limit, anything can happen, and most likely will happen. Yes, I'm thinking about cheating, I answered calmly. How could you? After all these years, how could you betray me? She asked perplexedly. I don't really see this as a betrayal. It's more of an alternative consolation, someone to talk to spend a few peaceful hours with, someone who won't argue or complain or otherwise ruin a perfectly good evening. I've been missing this for a long time, and I want it back, I explained. I can't believe you'd do this to me. My wife's face expressed both shock and bewilderment. Oh, come on, Sarah. What do you care about? We haven't made love in years. Yes, we had sex once in a blue moon, but I'd hardly call it making love when you're just lying there doing nothing. I decided to find someone who would actually enjoy me, I explained. My wife began to stutter, blushed, and shook her head. She apparently had difficulty with me finding someone who was more suitable for her. My name is Thomas Lufton. I am a successful investment advisor and have made myself and my family quite wealthy over the past 20 years. I am 48 years old. I am healthy and fit thanks to regular exercise and proper nutrition. I am married to Sarah Gaines Lufton, and we have been together for 24 years. We have 2 children. Aaron is 22 years old and Benita is 20 years old. Aaron will be a MIT graduate, and by all accounts, he is a genius. He will be a very rich young man if he decides to use his intelligence to make a profit. Benita is still at Wellesley, studying some obscure topic in art and history that won't make her any money, and God knows why she wants it as a career. Over the past 2 years, I have noticed that Sarah has changed. Unfortunately, it has changed for the worse. She became very negative. Someone who has everything has no satisfaction. She sees the dark side of everything and finds mistakes where there are none. One of the things she finds problems with is me. I constantly disappoint her in one way or another. In her opinion, I am stupid, inconsiderate, untalented, forgetful, lazy, arrogant, irresponsible. I could go on. Note that none of these shortcomings are due to my lack of love for Sarah. I think she's scared to broach the topic. Not for me. The thing about newfound wealth is that it takes away the fear. Fear of loneliness, for example. I can live without Sarah. Now I know it. If she wants a divorce, I will regretfully agree. In fact, I plan to suggest it. Since she now thinks that I may be looking for another bed, she may want to get rid of me. Losing her won't mean as much to me as I thought. Sarah Gaines, as I first knew her, was a bright, vivacious, wonderfully attractive young woman from a good, middle-class family in Boston. She was great company because she was so bubbly. She was never the most beautiful woman in my world, but she was the most energetic and attractive person I had ever met. It was these qualities that attracted me to her and ultimately led me to propose. Of course, she accepted. Our first years together were wonderful. I loved the way we made love. When we had children, Sarah proved to be a very capable and loving mother. She impressed me with her parenting skills. I attribute the fact that they grew up to be smart, successful, and polite children entirely to Sarah. She was their mentor and teacher in everything. I loved them very much, but their mother was their inspiration. It wasn't until the kids left for college that I began to notice changes in Sarah. I wouldn't call it depression, but my wife's joy and vibrancy began to fade. This change in mood has never been more noticeable than in the bedroom. She was always ready and provocatively sexy. When it started to decline, I was upset. I tried to discuss the problem with her, but she denied that anything had changed, saying that she loved me and always would. However, there was no denying that our love life was fading. I've lived in this situation for too long. I allowed our relationship to deteriorate, even if I did not initiate it. I had to challenge her and get her to accept the changes. To my regret, I didn't do this. As you already understood, our sexual interaction was reduced to a casual commitment. To put it bluntly, she was terrible in bed. Then the question arose, what to do? In contrast to my supposed intention of having a mistress, my opinion of cheating was very low. This violated marriage vows and destroyed trust within the married couple. However, I was not yet old. I had an active libido that was not only unsatisfied, but literally hungry. Desperation pushed me to do something dramatic. But first, I decided to try again to talk to Sarah about my concerns. Sarah, I'm very upset about our relationship. We seem to be growing apart. What's worse, you don't seem to like me very much. You find fault with me over little things and rarely seem happy. Our love is so rare that I can't remember the last time we had sex. Maybe it's time to talk about our future together, I said very seriously. Tom, what makes you think I'm unhappy? You can't expect me to be the same woman I was 20 years ago. I'm pretty satisfied with my life. I still love you, if that's what you're asking. And what is this talk about our future? She demanded. Sarah, you are still a very beautiful woman and very desirable. I find it frustrating that you don't want to make love the way we used to. I'm wondering if you want a divorce. Oh my God, Tom, where do you get these thoughts from? I admit, I'm not as sexually active as I used to be, but that doesn't mean I want to leave you. What's your problem? She asked, switching to an accusatory tone. My problem is very simple, Sarah. We don't make love anymore. We sometimes have sex, but we don't make love, I said with an accent. You're clearly unhappy because you spend most of your time when I'm around, complaining about things that don't matter. You're clearly unhappy. Nonsense. No, this is not nonsense at all. Whether you like it or not, it is a fact. I couldn't be more direct. I hope she will at least try to answer my accusations. This nonsense has gone on for too long. I won't stand here and listen to you make up problems that don't exist, she said arrogantly. Well, then I have no other choice. I will give you 90 days to think about our future. I will pack my things and leave you. I will not contact you for 3 months. After this period, I will return, and you can decide whether you want to change your behavior. If you decide to continue to ignore my concerns, I will file for divorce due to incompatibility of characters. Am I clear? I asked in a demanding tone. Sarah stood wide-eyed and speechless as I gave her my ultimatum. I wasn't sure she believed me. I walked past her and went up to our bedroom. I began packing my clothes and toiletries for my extended absence. A few minutes later, Sarah appeared at the door. You can't be serious. Are you leaving me? Are you just up and leaving? Yes, 90 days. Sarah, I will talk to you again in 90 days. In the meantime, you would be wise to seek professional help. I know you don't believe what a witch you have become, but I assure you, I will not tolerate the day of your unhappy appearance. And now, if you will allow me, I will go. I was convinced that this extreme act was the only way to shake Sarah out of her cozy misery. I've been thinking about separation for weeks. I was confident that this was the only way to change the status quo in our home. As I walked out the door into the garage, I wondered if she would follow me. She didn't. I wasn't particularly worried about the result. The only way I could see Sarah return to the wonderful wife I had so happily married so many years ago was to push her to her breaking point. I finally did what I should have done much earlier. I acted. I organized a room for myself in our club. It was an old, established place to live and a comfortable space with complete privacy. I changed my cell phone to another one with a new number that only a few trusted colleagues knew. I asked the club secretary to keep my whereabouts secret. I was almost sure that Sarah would be looking for me everywhere, but I suspected that she would never think to look for me where I was in plain sight. I was wrong. Mr. Lufton, your wife left you a message. It was Parsons, the club's concierge. Well, that's surprising. Does she know I'm staying here? I asked. I'm afraid so, sir. I guess I'll have to move on, I said thoughtfully. I found a small hotel complex in the suburbs and moved there that same day. I learned an important lesson. Don't underestimate Sarah. If there was a weakness in my plan, it was how I would spend the next 90 days. I was determined to avoid Sarah, but I wasn't really thinking about myself. What will I do? I couldn't go to my office. Sarah will be on alert. I couldn't visit our children. I'm sure Sarah already warned them. I didn't expect sympathy from them. What to do? In preparation for this 3-month trip, I made some financial changes to our personal accounts. I have limited the amount of funds available to Sarah in case she decides to resort to a scorched earth policy. She won't notice it if she acts as usual. However, if she decides to be reckless with our finances, she will find that she has limits. It's better to be safe than sorry. For me, I had no such restrictions and decided it was time to take a vacation. Alone. My threat of betrayal was just that, a threat. I couldn't imagine betraying my wife before we resolved our marital problems. Then I wondered how I should spend my self-proclaimed exile. I was able to stay connected to the office thanks to modern technology and satellite communications. No matter where in the world I found myself, I was just a heartbeat away from my virtual desktop. This meant that I was free to travel anywhere. I enjoy playing golf and decided to treat myself to a new set of clubs I've had my eye on for a while. I returned to my club, carefully checking that Sarah was not following me. The pro shop was open until late in the evening. I took out my old clubs, except for my favorite putter and sandwich, and placed a dozen new shafts in my bag. I zipped the cover around them and was ready to go. Since it was the end of April, I decided to start my travels in Algarve, Portugal. The weather was mild and the fields were almost empty. As spring and summer progressed, I planned to move north, ending in Scotland before returning home. A visit to my travel agent the next day would have been in order, but I suspected that Sarah might be following them. I handled all bookings online and via email. Naturally, I asked for confidentiality. 2 days later, I boarded a local flight to New York. I flew TAP business class to Lisbon and then to Faro. I rented a car for a month and began the first 30 days of my recovery. I drove into Albufeira and checked into the Bahia Mar resort. It was a beautiful location overlooking the Atlantic. The white modern building was located outside the old town near the highway, which suited my needs perfectly. No offense intended, I'm not a freak. I am almost 6 feet tall, and my weight has been stable over the years at 180 pounds. As I said earlier, fitness and diet keep me in great physical shape. I have all my teeth and most of my hair, although they are turning gray. When I look in the mirror, I think I look quite presentable. So it's no surprise that I attracted the attention of quite a few single women during my stay. That is, they claimed that they were alone. I'll be the first to admit that I've been seriously tempted on more than one occasion. However, I remained determined and committed to our marriage and turned down various offers. My golf game improved as I played at least 5 times a week. By the end of the month, I had lowered my handicap to 9 and developed a deep tan. I preferred to walk through the fields, used little or no golf carts as they often slowed play to a crawl. Luckily, the fields weren't crowded, and I could usually play in 2s or 3s with other walkers. Our rounds rarely took more than 3 hours. This left me to spend the rest of the day by the pool admiring all the attractive women. I would swim and then sit on a sun lounger under an umbrella with a book or magazine. With a 5-hour time difference, I could contact the office during the day and stay up to date. During my first week of downtime, Renee, my executive assistant, reported that Sarah had called several times demanding to know where I was. Renee could only tell her that I was abroad and unavailable. In fact, she knew approximately where I was, but not exactly. I needed to protect her trustworthiness. Around the beginning of the second week, Sarah stopped calling. Once the first third of my 90 days came to an end, I was satisfied with how things were going. I enjoyed my stay in the Algarve, but it was time to move on. I found a British travel agent in the old town, and we started looking for a place for my next 30-day stay. After much searching, we found a great guest house in Aix-en-Provence, France. It was close to the Côte d'Azur and only a 2-hour leisurely drive to Monte Carlo. I returned the rental car and boarded a flight to Marseille. I rented a car again and went to Aix-en-Provence, which was about 30 kilometers. I checked into the hotel, delighted by its mature appearance. The terms were simple but elegant. I was sure that I would like it here. There was no pool, but there was a lovely garden with a variety of places to sit, read, or relax with a glass of wonderful local red wine. The weather was warmer than I expected, and I needed lighter clothing. The shopping in town was great. The only problem I had was my inability to walk past a bakery or stop in for an afternoon or evening snack. I'll have to be disciplined here. The food was wonderful, and I couldn't wait to try something new every night. Although the golf courses were not as well maintained as in Portugal, I was pleased that there were several courses nearby that I could play. The weather remained warm in early June, and I wore shorts more often. I set aside time to travel around Provence and later to St. Maxime, St. Tropez, and finally Monte Carlo. I was more of a tourist enjoying my travels in the warm late spring. Great food and spectacular sights. It was an amazing month, and I was sad to leave. During the stay, I began to become a little interested in Sarah. I wondered whether she took my criticism seriously or simply dismissed it. Was she so angry that I left that she would happily divorce me? I wasn't worried, but I was interested. I called Renee and asked her to spy a little and find out what she could. Of course, I told Renee about our family problems. I couldn't leave her in the dark. She knew what this trip was about. Renee was in her 50s, and although she appeared to be a stern woman, she was an outstanding executive assistant. I paid her well to make sure she was happy. Despite her appearance, she was a warm woman. A widow with 3 grown sons, she was a grandmother several times. I could rely on her discretion and thoroughness. When Renee contacted me, it was clear that she had not been able to find out anything truly interesting at that time. Sarah was still living in our house and continuing her normal routine. I kept an eye on the bank accounts and credit cards, and other than a few extra restaurant bills, she seemed to be acting as normal. Interestingly, judging by the size of the bills, she ate alone. As my stay in France came to an end, I began planning the last month of my trip. I was planning to go to Scotland, the home of golf. I tried very hard to work with several local travel agents, but due to the language barrier and their lack of understanding of what a golf holiday was, it was not possible. I emailed my home agent, outlining what I was looking for and telling me when I wanted to return to America. At the beginning of July, I flew from Marseille to Edinburgh via London. My month in Scotland consisted of 4 one-week stays in Dundee, Aberdeen, Prestwick, and finally returning to Edinburgh. I have played St. Andrews and Royal Troon, as well as many other equally legendary courses. I learned to play in the elements and trusted my caddy. I played the best golf of my life, and yet I never broke 80 and rarely shot 85. By the end of July, I was ready to return home. I was fit and tanned, in good physical and mental health. I was ready to meet with Sarah and find out what decision she had made. I wasn't worried, but I was curious. I loved her, but I couldn't live with her while she was the unpleasant woman she had become. I boarded the plane and prepared for the 6-hour flight to Boston. I arrived home early on Wednesday morning. Earlier, I decided to go into my office and see Renee. I only checked into the hotel for one night in case the reunion with Sarah went wrong. I haven't yet decided whether to call my wife first to let him know I'm coming, or just show up at our house. I still hadn't made up my mind as I sat in the taxi on the way to the office. I told Renee about my plans in advance, so she was not surprised that I would arrive that day. She greeted me warmly, as always, and we sat in my office while I told her about my travels. She said she hadn't heard much from Sarah since the second week of my trip and had no new information about her. I asked for her opinion on how I should approach our meeting tomorrow. She was sure that calling first would be appropriate. Later that afternoon, I checked into the hotel and took care of a couple of errands. I needed a haircut and quickly went to the barber shop before it closed. I didn't like the haircuts I got in Portugal and France. Only in Scotland was I able to convey the style I wanted. Frank, my hairdresser, had no such problems. I enjoyed my first steak in 3 months and washed it down with a very good California Zinfandel. I chose the hotel restaurant because it was convenient and known to me for quality. I also decided that I would call Sarah tonight and tell her that I would be home tomorrow morning. This will give her time to prepare if necessary. When I returned to my room, I felt some excitement. The wine relaxed me, but I knew that at my age, jet lag would set in pretty quickly. I thought it best to call her now and find out what kind of reception I should expect. If it turns out to be extremely negative, then my plans may change. "Hello," Sarah answered softly. "Hi, Sarah. It's me, Tom." "Oh, Tom. I was wondering when I would hear from you," she said in a calm tone. "I came back and planned to be at our house tomorrow morning. Would that be convenient?" I asked carefully. "Of course," she paused. "When are you going to be here?" 10 o'clock in the morning suits you." "Yes, of course, but why do you feel like you have to ask permission?" It didn't sound like a complaint. It was more out of curiosity. "I've been away for a long time. I didn't take anything for granted, and I thought I had to call you first," I explained. "That's very considerate. I'll be glad to see you at 10, then." It didn't sound like a joke. It sounded sincere. "Yeah, well, good night, Sarah." "Good night, Tom." I couldn't tell her mood from the call. She was calm and quiet and not aggressive at all. It gave me hope for tomorrow and allowed me to sleep better that night. I arrived home a little before 10 the next morning. He looked the same as he did the day I left, 3 months ago. As always, everything was neat. The lawns had been mowed, and, apparently, recently, there were no signs of life, but this was not unusual. We rarely used more than 4 or 5 rooms in the house, and most of them were in the back. I parked my car in the circular driveway rather than parking it in the garage. I was unsure of my acceptance. I decided to leave the car in the front just in case things went wrong. I almost rang the bell, but then I realized that this was my home. I opened the unlocked door and entered. As I entered the hallway, I saw Sarah sitting in the living room in her favorite chair. I walked into the sunny room and saw my wife for the first time in 3 months. "Hi, Sarah," I said. "Hi, Tom," she replied, standing up to greet me with a small smile. I walked up to her and hugged her, kissing her softly. She surprised me. She returned my kiss. "It's good to see you again," she whispered, loosening the hug. "You look so healthy and tanned. I haven't seen you like this in years." I thought I was prepared for our reunion, but I was wrong. This was not the Sarah I left 3 months ago. "Would you like some coffee?" she asked. "Yeah, thanks," I said, following her into the kitchen. She took out my favorite mug and poured some coffee, handing it to me. "How are you doing, Sarah?" I began, hesitantly. She looked at me strangely for a moment. "It's okay," she said quietly. "Tell me about the last 3 months," I suggested, trying to start a conversation. She looked at me again with that strange look, and then sat down on the kitchen chair, looking into her cup, her hands laying flat on the table in front of her. "I tried to find you, but Renee couldn't or wouldn't help me. You just disappeared. I guess that was your plan," she said, looking up at me. I nodded in confirmation. I was upset for a while. I hadn't been alone in years. I called the kids every now and then, but it wasn't the same. After the first week, I realized I had to do something or I'd go crazy. I went to Dr. Tamer. I told her about our separation and your feelings for me. All she wanted was to prescribe antidepressants. I got angry and left her office. I looked for another doctor, and with Renee's help, I found Dr. Mitchell. She is much younger, but not like Dr. Tamer. She is not a big fan of drugs unless they are life-saving. She told her story in a calm, matter-of-fact voice. "Did you say with the help of Renee?" I asked in surprise. "Yes. A few years ago, she told me that she was going through a hard time with menopause and that she found this wonderful doctor who really helped her. It was Dr. Mitchell, and I made an appointment with her. Are you suggesting that your problems are related to menopause? I asked carefully. Doctor, Mitchell thought it was possible, Sarah answered cautiously. She's good to me, Tom. We talked for a long time, and she thought I needed professional help. She referred me to another doctor who specializes in emotional problems associated with menopause. I didn't even know such specialists existed. I'm still not sure that this was the reason for my behavior. I just knew that I couldn't continue to live like this. I had to try to do something to feel better, she admitted. So, you were aware of your temperamentality? Yes, of course. I knew I was unhappy, but I didn't see how I could get out of it. I just wasn't smart enough to ask for help sooner. I thought it would go away with time, she admitted. When did I tell you about this? I couldn't bring myself to admit that I had a problem. I was just in denial. I didn't realize how distant you were. I didn't really believe, or want to believe, that you would actually leave. I definitely couldn't imagine that you would have an affair. But when you left and I realized that you were serious, I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. So, tell me about your new doctor then. I was curious what was going on with Sarah. Dr. Bartholomew is a psychiatrist. Strangely, he, a man, deals with women's problems, mainly menopause, but sometimes others. He seems to be in his 70s, but he was very helpful. I really feel that he made a difference, she said with hope in her voice. Great, great. Tell me more, I asked, beginning to feel enthusiastic about this turn of events. I don't even know where to start. I'm still seeing him, and will be for a while, I guess. I don't have all the answers, but at least now I understand a little more about what was going on. By the way, if you will agree, he would like to talk to you too, Tom, Sarah said carefully. Okay, whatever I can do to help, I will do, I replied firmly. That's when I saw the first hint of a smile on Sarah's face. I could almost feel her relaxing. We were both very tense, almost afraid to dig too deep. Tell me about yourself, Tom. What have you done in the last 3 months to get such a wonderful tan? She smiled. Played golf, hiked, swimmed, walked. The usual stuff, I said simply. Renee said you were abroad. Where did you go? Portugal, then southern France and Scotland. I really needed to get away, Sarah. I didn't know how necessary it was until I got there and started relaxing and enjoying myself. Looks like I needed therapy too, I said regretfully. You look great. You're so handsome and fit. You look younger than when you left, she smiled. I had no reason to think that she was not sincere. I just thought the same thing about you. I don't remember the last time I saw you with a tan like that. What were you doing? Swimmed in our pool, walked around the neighborhood, played sports. That was part of what Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Bartholomew insisted on. Both said my fitness wasn't as good as it should be, even though I wasn't overweight. They were right. I feel much better now, she smiled. I'm really glad, Sarah. You really made an effort, didn't you? Sarah looked at me with a smile, and then I saw a shadow pass across her face. Something was bothering her. Tom, will you stay? Here, she asked with a worried grimace. I sighed and leaned back in my chair. How to answer this question? I'm encouraged by the steps she's taken, but will it actually change her behavior? I had a decision to make, and I had to give Sarah an answer. Sarah, you've clearly realized that this can't go on. If I've achieved anything, it's brought this to the forefront. I was hoping for maybe a simple solution. Yes, I'll be the same Sarah, or perhaps, no, I'm not going to change, but nothing is that simple, is it? I stopped for a moment, looking at my wife, and now understanding what I needed to do. Yes, Sarah, I will stay. I will help you in any way I can, and I will support you as long as you continue to get help. All we can do is try. If you keep trying, I will try too, I promised. She stood up and walked over to me, put her arms around my neck, and then kissed me lightly. She was almost afraid to get too close to me. This got me thinking about what other changes might have occurred. Finally, she stepped back, and I could see an expression on her face that I took to be uncertain. "Tom, I have to ask you, have you had an affair with another woman?" She barely squeezed out this question. I smiled. "No, Sarah, I didn't do it. You know how I feel about cheating. I couldn't do it to you any more than you could do it to me. My threat was a desperate attempt to get you to acknowledge my disappointments and unhappiness. I'm sorry. If I didn't make it clear earlier, I probably shouldn't have said what I said in the first place. I assure you, I have always been faithful to you, and always will be." I spoke quietly, but hopefully convincingly enough that she would not doubt my fidelity. She smiled and then returned to her chair. My answer seemed to satisfy her. "There's one more thing." "Dear," said Sarah, "Dr. Bartholomew suggested that we sleep apart while we were on more stable basis. He said it would be a mistake to resume marital relations too quickly." I was stunned by this revelation. I thought I could try to rekindle our long-forgotten sexual relationship as part of our reconciliation, but now, that seemed impossible at the moment. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but if this is what he's offering, then I guess I'll just have to accept it," I said with a half-joking smile. "Thank you, Tom. Thanks for your understanding," she said, smiling. Well, it wasn't a perfect solution, but it was better than nothing. At least there was some hope of restoring our relationship. I'll rely on this. I was in a hurry. I was already 10 minutes late for our lunch date and still needed to park and get to the marina. I dressed, as I always did for Michael, in the most minimalistic outfit possible to speed up the undressing. I walked up to his boat and stepped on board, barely able to catch my breath. "Sarah, are you okay?" Michael asked carefully. "Yeah, just a little out of breath. My conversation with Tom took longer than I expected. It took forever before he left for his office," I explained. "Take your time, love. We have plenty of time and most of the day ahead to enjoy," he said, smiling. Michael Sandusky was my lover and had been for over 3 months. He was a couple of years younger than me, but that didn't matter to either of us. He wasn't married. In fact, he never married. He said that he did not believe in this institution, as he put it. I'm guessing you're wondering why I cheated on my faithful husband with another man. The answer was simple. Since Tom became rich, he has also become unbearably arrogant. When we first got married, and he was trying to grow his business, I was very happy. We loved and adored our 2 children, as most parents do. Tom was handsome, and I tried to look presentable as his wife. I think I was able to do this because he complimented me regularly. Something changed in Tom when his business began to flourish. He started acting like he was invincible. He moved from one business success to another and enjoyed his craft. Unfortunately, his attitude carried over into his personal life, especially with his family and friends. I began to feel like I had become an accessory, a decoration to be displayed for the occasion. He also began to treat his children as his successors. Naturally, they would follow him in business. It was a given in his head. When Aaron decided to study mathematics at MIT, Tom was a little annoyed. He was confident that Aaron would change his mind after graduation and become his natural successor. When Benita chose art history as her major, he was more than annoyed. It was almost as if she had run off with some scruffy hippie and disowned her family. He was not shy about expressing his opinion, and it was not pleasant. He alienated his daughter and misunderstood his son. I began to feel that he no longer saw me as a partner, but as a subordinate guest. He didn't consult me on important decisions, like where to go on vacation. He simply acted and then informed me of his decision. When I began to resist, he was clearly unhappy with my behavior. I reached the limit of my tolerance for Tom's obnoxious behavior when I met Michael. I visited some friends that Tom hasn't alienated yet. Michael was a guest. I found out that he lives on a sailing yacht. The idea intrigued me. I was sure that I would suffer from claustrophobia in such an environment. As we talked, I realized how nice it is to deal with a mature, balanced person. I was intrigued, but definitely not fascinated by this stranger. For now, at least. Michael called me a week after we met and asked me to have lunch on his boat. I don't know why I agreed, other than the interest in his lifestyle and the comfort I felt when I was around him. It seemed completely natural to me to accept an offer to have lunch with a stranger at his home. Michael's sailboat was quite large, over 40 feet. He called it a cruiser, not designed for speed, but for comfort and space. I was surprised when he showed me around. Everything was very compact, but fully equipped. I was also intrigued by the cabin because it had a queen-sized bed. We had lunch on the aft deck under the canopy. I was surprised how quickly time flew by. We talked and told each other about our lives. I even shared my dissatisfaction with Tom's attitude. It was something I thought I would never do. Before I went home, Michael insisted on taking me on a sailing trip, and again I couldn't think of a good reason to refuse. Later, I thought about my motives and began to feel uncomfortable with how easily I agreed to date this man who was not my husband. Was I unfaithful? Not really, at least not yet. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I was confident that I wouldn't give up on my marriage commitment. When I got home that afternoon, I noticed the blinking light on our answering machine and pressed play. It was Tom. He had some important meeting and said he would be home late, and I shouldn't worry about dinner for him. This was not unusual for him, but the tone of the message was annoying. He didn't even bother to apologize. He stopped doing this a long time ago. It was more like an ad on a bulletin board. There was nothing personal attached to it. As I sat alone that evening, I began to reflect on my life. The children were already in college, Aaron at Cambridge and Benita at Wellesley. Tom, as always, was engrossed in his work and went to the office every weekday. I had a lot of free time. The house was cleaned by a housekeeping service, and we often ate out, so my duties as a housewife were limited. With both children at school, I had a lot of free time. The question became, what to do about it? I suggested to Tom that I get a job to keep myself busy, but he didn't want to hear about it. It was humiliating and unnecessary. This could make people think we are struggling, and it would be bad for business. It seems my happiness had nothing to do with business. I considered volunteering, but again Tom thought it was stupid and inconvenient. He came up with a series of absurd scenarios to prove his point, and again I gave in. I needed something. I rarely watched TV, and I wasn't interested in many books. And then, out of the blue, Michael appeared. The following week, after our initial lunch, Michael called and invited me on a sailing trip the next day. The weather promised to be good, with moderate wind. We'll leave as soon as I arrive in the morning and be back at the dock by mid-afternoon. I'll have plenty of time to get home, shower, and change. I accepted the invitation. I knew I would accept him when he first suggested it a week earlier. In the days that followed, Michael and I met often, usually for lunch on his boat. He was aware that we were both well known in the community. It would be very difficult for me if I were seen having lunch with a strange man. However, the boat was the ideal meeting place. Hidden among hundreds of other boats, she offered privacy that we couldn't find anywhere else. However, he was very careful. I started to think that we were meant to have an affair. It was only a matter of time. He was irresistible. What's worse is that I fell in love with him. He was so kind and attentive that I could not resist. He was everything I wanted Tom to be. He was everything Tom had once been. It was almost as if I was trying to bring back the past. Our first time was so idyllic, it's hard to describe. We were in some secluded bay, anchored and alone. It was a cool, crisp New England day, and we enjoyed our lunch in the boat's gallery as it rocked gently. We shared a bottle of wine, and I felt peaceful and happy. Michael put the dishes away and put them in the sink, then turned to me and picked me up. "Sarah, I want you," he said simply. I could only nod in agreement. He took me to the cabin, and we undressed. There was no rush. We made love, and I enjoyed every moment. I was intoxicated with pleasure and happiness. As I walked home that afternoon, I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with Michael if he wanted me. I would stay with Tom until I felt the kids were old enough to be independent, and then I would leave. I mentally and physically completed my betrayal. I didn't like that I did this to him, but I wouldn't give up my happiness for his arrogance. Divorce was the most appropriate action. Michael, I said quietly, if I divorce Tom, what will that mean for us? It was the day after we completed our affair. He turned to me as we lay together in his bed. It would mean we could end this mystery, stop this cover-up, pretending we don't know each other. It would mean we could plan the rest of our lives, he said quietly. That's what I hoped for. That's what I want too. I love you, Michael, I said. I'm sure I smiled when I said that. Are you sure, Sarah? Divorce is a big step. A very destructive step. Have you thought about it well? He asked carefully. I think the kids will understand. I think they know the kind of life I've been living lately. I think they'll understand, I said, trying to convince myself. You know how I feel about marriage, he said. Yes, I don't care. It doesn't matter. If I'm with you, that will be enough. If you don't want to marry me, that's one thing. If you don't want to be with me, that's another, I said seriously. I want to be with you, Sarah. I want to be with you forever. I was sure he meant it. I needed to be confident. Michael, I love you. I want to be with you. Always, I begged. Please don't think badly of me. I risk everything for you. I broke my marriage commitments for you. I gave you my soul. This is not about me. This is about us, I begged. Sarah, I would never let you go. I'm lost to you now. You've got a hold of me like no other, he admitted. In the following days, I did not try to hide my contempt for my husband and his behavior. He didn't understand it and probably never would. It was so easy for me to criticize him. It seemed so simple to let go of all the frustration and anger that had built up over the past years. Finally, Tom couldn't stand it anymore. He issued his ultimatum. 90 days. Really? I put up with his arrogance and insensitivity for years, and he thought that everything would be resolved in 90 days. I couldn't wait for him to leave. I played the role of the angry, confused, worried wife. I knew Tom too well. He will do what he said and go as far from home as possible. I almost immediately learned that he had decided to take refuge in his club. It was too close for comfort, so I left him a message. I noticed that he moved quickly. It didn't take much pressure on Renee to learn that he had left the country and didn't want to be found. Perfect. The next 3 months were the best in my memory. Michael and I sailed all over the coast in the spring and summer. I went home once or twice a week to check email, pay bills, and make the neighbors think I was still there. The landscape service took care of the lawns and hedges, and I stopped delivering newspapers until the week before Tom returned. As far as anyone knew, I was still living at home. I indulged in nice dinners to show Tom that I was free, but I didn't spend a lot of money. I was sure that he was monitoring the accounts via the internet. I wasn't a computer whiz, so there was no point in trying to trick him. It's better to just keep everything under control. Business as usual, or so he had to think. Meanwhile, Michael and I sailed the coastal seas on his beautiful boat. He even taught me quite a bit about sailing, and I became at least a useful sailor. I loved the silence on the sailboat and the smell of the sea. I had to be careful to apply sunscreen and skin lotions to avoid burns or wrinkles from all weather conditions. This would be a clear sign to Tom that something is going on. In the meantime, I was becoming quite fit and healthy thanks to all the exercises, both day and night. Michael never got tired of my body, and I never got tired of giving it to him. We enjoyed each other. I was sad to see the end of 3 months approaching, but August was coming, and that meant I would have to go back to my old life, at least for a while. Tom was waiting for a decision. I continued to see Dr. Bartholomew as part of my menopause treatment. The fact that I had no such problem was never discussed. The good doctor was pleased to receive my money for treating a condition that did not actually exist. If he knew or suspected, he said nothing. Moreover, when he asked me about my husband, I expressed all my dissatisfaction and disappointment. I even suggested that the doctor meet with Tom and form his opinion. Again, he happily agreed. What got me thinking was what Dr. Mitchell suggested. I heard somewhere that menopause can cause increased sexuality in women. I always thought it was a myth. When my new doctor suggested this, I began to understand some of the changes that had happened to me. I have been much more sexually active in the last 5 months than ever before. I thought it was because of Michael, but looking back, it could also be because of this menopausal reaction. Whatever the reason, I was delighted and enjoyed every moment. I never told Michael that I cut Tom off from sexual activity almost completely. Michael provided me with everything I could want and more if I wanted it. When Tom returned, I played the role of a repentant, worried wife who was afraid of losing her husband's love. I told him about the change of doctors and my therapy. I attributed my tanned and healthy appearance to the fact that I participated in an exercise program. This was partly true. I definitely got a lot of exercise on Michael's boat and in his bed. When I suggested that Dr. Bartholomew also talk to him, I saw a twinkle in his eye and knew that he believed the whole story. I met with Dr. Bartholomew today, Sarah, Tom said. I saw the expression on his face, and it was not happy. He said he never suggested we sleep in separate rooms. He also said he's surprised if you're not making up symptoms you don't have. What do you have to say about that? Are you calling me a liar? I asked calmly. No. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, he said, looking completely puzzled. Damn it. I don't care what that old man says. What he said, I know what he told me, I said decisively. And what did he tell you about my symptoms to make you think I was faking it? I asked in a demanding tone. He said your symptoms didn't fit any pattern he knew of. He said you seemed more interested in, complaining about me. Well, let him go to hell. I'm tired of this. First you, and now the doctors. I almost screamed. I wondered if I had gone too far. I saw the look on Tom's face, and I could see what he was thinking. He thought it was happening again, just like before he left. My act of repentance did not last long. I could hardly restrain myself from smiling. The look on his face was priceless. Tom didn't say anything, but I saw his shoulders drop, and I knew what it meant. He was defeated, and he knew it. Now all that remained was to find out what he would do, I thought. He went into his office and closed the door behind him. It was only a matter of time before I knew his decision. The message was, think about the problem, make a decision and act. He was so predictable. I went to our bedroom and sat in my little corner. I had no appetite and no interest in cooking at that point. As I sat there, I thought about my future. No matter what Tom decided, I knew our marriage was over. If he tried to justify my behavior, I would simply ask for a divorce. If he had refused, I would have filed for divorce myself, citing irreconcilable differences. This would be a completely accurate description. I went downstairs around 8 o'clock in the evening and noticed that Tom was nowhere in the house. I looked into the garage and outside. His car was not visible. I asked in the refrigerator and found some lettuce and enough ham for a sandwich. I poured myself a gin and tonic and sat down at the kitchen table with my dinner. I was tired after my little theater performance earlier. Somehow this did not give me satisfaction. I did not feel victory in my insidious plan. That it worked was more a result of Tom's predictability than my cunning. I tossed and turned in bed all night. I didn't sleep much. I imagined what Tom would say or do. I also felt guilty. Did he really deserve this? Was he so insensitive and arrogant that he needed to be provoked like that? I just couldn't decide. The next morning, Tom was nowhere to be found. He was obviously at home, as there were traces of his breakfast in the sink, but he must have left much earlier than usual. This didn't surprise me. Why would he want to experience this again? Tom never returned. I called his office and Renee told me he was on a business trip. I didn't know if it was true or not. Everything became clear when the doorbell rang the next day and a man handed me an envelope saying I had received a summons. I opened the envelope and took out the papers. I knew what it was without even reading them. Lawsuit for divorce. I have achieved my goal. Why didn't I celebrate? Why was it less satisfying? Now I have Michael. Why didn't I feel like I won? I knew the answer, of course. I made Tom act this way. I manipulated him into acting this way. How unpleasant could he be? Did he deserve it? I sat in my chair in the living room and let my thoughts wander. I should have been happy. I should have celebrated with Michael. I didn't even tell him. What did this mean? Have I made a terrible mistake? Only time will tell. I settled comfortably into a large chair in Monique Dollar's beautiful living room. It had been 6 months since I separated from Sarah, and I had been quite active sexually. Monica was just one in a long line of women seeking to win a rich, powerful man. My divorce was due to be finalized in a few days, and I could plan for my future. I'm glad this ordeal is over. I enjoy my freedom, especially my sexual freedom. I'm a little surprised that so many women want to be with me. Of course, I know that they can lay claim to my money and lifestyle. On the other hand, I'm in no hurry to get married again. I just like to evaluate the product. My children sympathized with me because of the divorce, but they were always closer to their mother. I'm not surprised or disappointed. I understand. Despite her cheating, they love her unconditionally, and that's a good thing. I'm in the final stages of selling my business. This will make me even richer than I imagined. The closing date will be the day after the divorce becomes final. I wonder what will happen to Sarah. It seems her lover sailed away without saying goodbye to her. Oh yes, I knew about Michael. Renee found out about Sarah's affair when my wife confessed to her shortly after I moved out. I was surprised that Renee and Sarah continued to communicate. I was very upset that Sarah cheated on me. Sarah won't have to worry, of course. The divorce agreement will provide for her for the rest of her life, as long as she is not excessively spendthrift. She is still a beautiful woman and will easily attract men. On the other hand, her personality is such that she may also push them away. Monica entered the room on time, and I took a moment to admire her beauty and elegant clothes. She was a middle-aged man's fantasy. Big breasts, wide hips, a wide smile, and a good appetite. I wonder if I'll get tired of it after 2 or 3 weeks like most others have. No matter, there are many more. I stood on the pier, stunned. There was no boat where Michael should have been. Perhaps he took her to the shipyard for repairs. I hurried to the office at the entrance to the dock. They said Michael paid the bill by the end of the month and left. They didn't know where he was going or if he would return. My worst fears were confirmed. He left, without leaving a note, without calling, without warning, nothing, just left. I felt as if my heart had sunk through the bottom of my body. I was dizzyingly confused, 1,000 thoughts running through my head at once. And so I returned home. Home to an empty house. Tom left 3 months ago, and I have not seen or heard from him since then except through my lawyer through his lawyer. He provided a generous divorce settlement, and I was in no mood to resist. I was looking forward to starting a new life with Michael. This new life disappeared overnight. What made him leave? Has he changed his mind about us? Did I do something to push him away that I wasn't even aware of? Was our romance a deception from the very beginning? I will have a lot of time to think about these questions in the future. I've already decided to sell the house, and Michael's disappearance won't change that. I can't live here anymore. Too many memories, good and bad. It's like living in a tomb. Lonely, no one around except the cleaners and gardeners. I already called a friend at a local real estate agency. I even thought about getting a license and working for their company. I needed something to occupy my time. Work was not necessary for my survival, only for my peace of mind. I traded arrogance for loneliness. Did I deserve my fate? Probably. I cheated and plotted to alienate my husband. Despite my disappointments and his shortcomings, I created my own hell. I had to get out of it myself. If I had asked Tom what he thought about all this, I'm sure his answer would have been, "Frankly, my dear, I don't care." Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one.